Greetings, friends. In this short little video, would to expand on what we covered earlier about variables and talk specifically about independent and dependent variables. As you know, we talk about in quantitative research that um, quant is really all about variables and understanding the nature of the relationship between them. And that it's important for us to get good data, make sure that we have operationalized our variables and collected data that is accurate. But for us, once we've done that, then we need to go ahead and perform the mathematical calculations and understand what those calculations are. So what we want to do is talk about specifically dependent and independent variables, and what the difference is and how that might help you in your study. Basically, a dependent variable is some variable, some attribute or characteristic that is dependent on or influenced by the independent variable. That means when the independent variable changes, the dependent variable changes as well. This is often called an outcome or an effect or a consequence. The independent variable is what causes that change. So if we talked about if you spend time on math instruction, your math scores will improve. So the independent variable is the time spent on instruction. The dependent variable is the score. Some examples of that to kind of get our head around the ideas. Independent variable would be time spent on a task, and the dependent variable would be the outcome, the assessment that you would use for that outcome. Independent variable is calories, and the dependent variable would be the amount of weight you would gain if you increase those calories. Hours of mentoring. The more mentoring you have, the higher your first year success is oftentimes. College education. The more college you have, the higher your income is. So these, in this column here, are the independent variables, and the dependent variables in this column over here to give you a rough idea of how this works. Now there's a phrase that is often used in stats. Correlation is not always causation. Just because two things are correlated doesn't mean that one necessarily causes the other. And one of the classic examples of this is that when one researcher noted that there's a relationship between increased ice cream sales and crime. And if you rush too quickly to see that one might cause the other, you could say that, well, maybe it's, maybe ice cream causes crime, or increase in crime causes increase in ice cream sales, when actually neither are true. There is another that actually influences both. And so once you got these results, you would have to then think, okay, what is that relationship? And you would see, well, maybe it's because when the weather gets hot, more people are interested in ice cream, and then also more people are outside, and can increase the incidence of crime. So you need to be careful when you think about correlation and causation, and not jump too quickly to make the jump from things that are correlated to one thing causing the other. Another example would be something that we referred to earlier: time spent on the internet and loneliness. Just because they're correlated, does that mean that one causes the other? Or could people who are predisposed to loneliness spend more time on the internet because they're looking for something? It doesn't necessarily mean if they stopped using the internet that they all of a sudden would stop being lonely. So what you're doing is when you start seeing these correlations, this is where your research, your lit review, and the quality of you as a critical thinker comes into play. Because what you are trying to do in your research is create a theory as to what is the relationship between this independent variable and the dependent variable, if there even is one. And so you would go back and you would take a look at the independent variables and dependent variables, time on task and learning outcome. Well, of course it makes sense. to think in terms of increasing the amount of time on task as increasing the learning outcome. And this is the power of doing this kind of research. Because when you know what the independent and dependent variables are, you can, quote unquote, manipulate the independent variable. You can change it. And you know if these two are correlated, if they're related, then if you change the one, then there should be a change in the other. And that's why so much research is done around correlations, especially independent and dependent variables, because we know that because of our positions of responsibilities and leadership that we can change oftentimes the independent variables, and that for the research we know that the dependent variable will change. And this then becomes the power of doing this kind of research.